Hello, my name is Izzy Kasdan, and I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Cultural Trust. Today we will be reviewing what the Cultural Trust is, its unique qualification process, and how to apply to become qualified. I will start by providing a brief introduction to the New Jersey Cultural Trust. The Cultural Trust is part of a constellation of arts and cultural agencies housed at the state of New Jersey, many of which you may be familiar with, including the New Jersey Historic Trust, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. The Cultural Trust is the youngest among these arts and culture agencies. It was established by legislation in 2000. The mission of the Cultural Trust is to ensure a stable and healthy cultural industry in New Jersey that is sustainable under fluctuating economic conditions. The Cultural Trust is a public-private partnership, which means it is funded both by public, state dollars, and by private contributions. The Cultural Trust is also a permanent investment fund, which means it functions essentially as an endowment for New Jersey's cultural community. The Historical Commission and State Council on the Arts receive an annual appropriation and grant it all out each year as grants. By contrast, the Cultural Trust does not rely on annual appropriations for grant making. The Cultural Trust is a large sum of money that is permanently invested. The income off of those investments is used each year for grant making. The Cultural Trust's primary focus is grant making that addresses the issue of undercapitalization at cultural nonprofits. The Trust does this by focusing on three targeted areas that are crucial to ensuring fiscal and operational health, stability, and durability at cultural organizations. These funding priority areas are to build the endowments of nonprofit arts, history, and humanities organizations, to finance important capital projects, and to grow the organizational and financial capacity of cultural organizations. With these goals in mind, the Cultural Trust offers three different types of grants in an annual rotation: institutional and financial stabilization grants for arts organizations, institutional and financial stabilization grants for history and humanities organizations, and capital historic preservation grants for arts, history, and humanities organizations. There is never a match required for Cultural Trust grants. To get a sense of these grant programs, you can review past guidelines on the Cultural Trust website. The establishing legislation links the Cultural Trust to three recommending agencies with which the Cultural Trust partners to offer its grant programs. The three recommending agencies are the New Jersey Historic Trust, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. For each grant round, it is the recommending agency and not the Cultural Trust that directs the creation of the guidelines and application, accepts applications, manages the review panel process, and determines who should receive a Cultural Trust grant. These recommendations for grant funding are then submitted to the Cultural Trust Board for ultimate approval. For the upcoming fiscal year 26 grant round, the New Jersey Historical Commission is the recommending agency, so only history and humanities organizations are eligible to apply. In order to be eligible to apply for any of the Cultural Trust annual grant programs, however, organizations must first be designated qualified by the Cultural Trust. That's the bulk of what we'll be discussing today. Why should you go through the process to become qualified? Because it's the only way to become eligible to benefit from the grant programs that the Cultural Trust offers in partnership with its recommending agencies. You can think of qualification as a sort of registration process with the Trust. Because the Trust's mission is to bolster the sustainability of cultural organizations as a whole, you must first demonstrate that you meet certain criteria as an organization overall. That's what qualification is. As I said, you have to make sure you have applied for qualification and that the Cultural Trust Board has determined that you meet the requirements for qualification before you can apply for any grant opportunities. Applying for qualification is totally separate from applying for a grant. Once you are qualified, you are then eligible to start a separate grant application. Since applying for qualification and applying for grant funding are two separate processes, you should be aware that the information you share in your qualification application does not carry over to any grant application. Qualification is not like a declaration of intent to apply for a grant. It's not linked to any specific grant application. Once you become qualified, your status as a qualified organization lasts at least 3 years. If you receive a Cultural Trust grant in that time frame, your qualification status automatically renews. During the 3 years in which you are designated qualified, you can apply for any cultural trust grant opportunity that becomes available. Here we have an overview of the steps in the cultural trust qualification process. First and foremost, before you even start compiling an application, check the list of qualified organizations on the Cultural Trust's website to double check that you are not already qualified. If you are already qualified, wait until your status expires to reapply. Once you have confirmed that you need to apply for qualification, you will access the qualification guidelines online, assemble the required information and attachments, and then complete and submit the online qualification application form. Once the Cultural Trust receives your application, we review it to make sure all of the required materials have been submitted and that it meets the eligibility requirements. If any materials are missing, we will contact you and give you the opportunity to edit your online application to add the missing materials. It's very important that the information you provide for the principal contact person is accurate so that we have a way of reaching you for this purpose. Once Cultural Trust staff determine that your application is complete, your details will be submitted to the board for consideration at their next scheduled board meeting. At that meeting, the board will consider whether your organization sufficiently meets the requirements for qualification. They will vote on whether or not to designate your organization as qualified. After the board votes, there is a 10-day veto period in which the governor's office has the opportunity to veto any board action. After waiting that 10-day period, your qualification status becomes final and is valid for 3 years. In order to become qualified, an organization must meet the following criteria. The application form and required attachments serve to help the Cultural Trust staff and board evaluate whether or not your organization meets these requirements. First, you must be a separately incorporated nonprofit organization. You must be tax exempt under the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. You must be incorporated for at least 4 years prior to applying, and you must be operating for at least 4 consecutive years prior to applying. You must have a functioning board that provides financial oversight to the standards set by the Cultural Trust. And you must have a primary mission to promote the performing, visual, and creative arts in New Jersey, or to promote and preserve history and humanities in New Jersey. This criterion is critical. I want to emphasize that organizations must be primarily arts, history, or humanities focused. Because the Cultural Trust focuses on supporting the institutional stability of the cultural sector, grantees must be cultural institutions, not cultural programs. Organizations with broader missions, like schools, community centers, and parks and recreational facilities that run arts, history, or humanities programs alongside non-cultural programs are not eligible. Whatever institution is tied to the EIN number submitted, that's the institution whose mission we must evaluate for a primary cultural focus. For the purposes of evaluating organizations' primary missions, the Cultural Trust uses the following definitions for arts, history, and the humanities. Performing visual and creative art shall include, but not be limited to, music, theater, dance, literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, photography, film art, handicrafts, graphic arts, and design. History is the study of the human past as it is constructed and interpreted with artifacts, written evidence, and oral traditions. The work of history shall include, but not be limited to, research, teaching, and publication, the collection, preservation, and exhibition of historical documents, oral traditions, artifacts, and sites, the dissemination of historical records and information, the creation and presentation of historical programming, and the broadening of historical knowledge. The term humanities shall include, but not be limited to, the study and interpretation of the following: languages, linguistics, literature, history, jurisprudence, philosophy, archaeology, comparative religion, ethics, the history, criticism, and theory of the arts, those aspects of the social sciences which have humanistic content and employ humanistic methods, and the study and application of the humanities to the human environment. The organization must also be New Jersey-based. In order to assess whether your organization is sufficiently New Jersey-based, the application will ask you to respond to the following questions about your organization. This is how the Cultural Trust determines whether your primary mission is in New Jersey. There are 4 criteria. The organization maintains a primary location in New Jersey, or more than 50% of the organization's staff is based in New Jersey. More than 50% of the organization's audience is composed of New Jersey residents. More than 50% of the organization's budget is expended in New Jersey, or more than 50% of the organization's programming occurs in New Jersey. You must meet at least 2 of the 4 criteria in order to be eligible for board consideration. And finally, your organization must be in good standing with New Jersey Charities Registration and Division of Revenue filing. The following types of entities are not eligible to become qualified by the Cultural Trust: individual artists or historians, for-profit entities, nonprofit entities whose primary mission is not to promote the performing, visual, and creative arts in New Jersey, or to promote or preserve history and humanities in New Jersey, private, state, county, or municipal colleges and universities, state, county, or local governmental units, authorities, or corporations created by such units, qualifying governmental bodies as defined in New Jersey Title 52. Qualification is a separate application process. The qualification application form is available on the Cultural Trust website. The URL for the Cultural Trust website is on the screen. The application is an online form which requires you to fill out information about your organization and upload required attachments. Unlike grant applications, qualification does not happen on stage, but in a different online submission platform. Here's how to find the qualification application on the Cultural Trust website. Once on the Trust website, in the top navigation bar, use the Grant Opportunities drop-down menu to navigate to the qualification page. Once on the qualification page, you will find the list of currently qualified organizations, the qualification guidelines, and the qualification application. This hyperlink will always take you to the most up-to-date list of organizations that are already qualified by the Cultural Trust. This hyperlink will take you to the PDF with the qualification guidelines. Be sure to read this document before you begin the online qualification application. This is what the qualification guidelines PDF will look like when it loads. The first 2 pages are instructions about what qualification is and the qualification requirements. Please read these carefully. The rest of the PDF, beginning on page 3, is the online qualification application checklist. This includes all of the information and uploads you will need to complete the online application. Please note, there is no save function on the online application. Use the checklist to make sure you have all of this information and all of the required uploads ready to go before you begin the online application. When you have gathered all of the information and uploads required for the qualification application, you are ready to fill out the online form. Once again, go to the qualification page on the Cultural Trust website and click this hyperlink. This is what the online qualification application looks like. In the information at the top of the page, you will find another link to the guidelines in case you need to refer to them as you complete the application. The application asks for basic information about your organization. This includes 3 different identifying numbers for your organization: your FEIN number, your charities registration number, and your Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services entity ID number. The distinction between these numbers can sometimes be confusing, so I will review each of these separately. Your Federal Employer Identification Number, or FEIN, is the number assigned to you by the federal government. It is 9 digits long. It is included on your IRS letter of determination. If you do not know your organization's FEIN number, your bank may have this information, as you would have had to use it to open an account. You can call the IRS Business and Specialty Tax Line at 1-800-829-4933, or you can check your Form 990. The EIN number is listed on the first page in Section D, which I have highlighted in this image. Your charities registration number is a number assigned to you by the state government. It is 7 digits long, beginning with CH. You use it annually when filing your charities registration with the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. If you do not know your organization's charities registration number, you can search for it on the Charities Registration website. We provided a link to this public database in the online application form. Or you can check your charity's registration filing, which would be the Form CRI 200, CRI 300R, or Form CRI 400 that you submit online every year. Charity's registration is required in order to be eligible to be qualified by the Cultural Trust. If your organization is not currently a registered charity, you will need to register in order to be eligible. On the same Consumer Affairs website where you can search for your charity's registration number, you should also check your charity's registration file standing. Many organizations may not be aware if their file standing is non-compliant or retired. Sometimes it's as a result of a minor issue on a filing from several years ago. The Cultural Trust cannot qualify your organization if your file standing is non-compliant or retired. Search for your organization on this website and check your file standing. You should contact charity's registration as soon as possible to rectify any non-compliant or retired standing. In your email, always include the deadline by which you need the standing rectified. Be sure to communicate a sense of urgency if there is one. Again, your file standing will need to be compliant in order for your qualification application to proceed to Cultural Trust Board review. Your Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services number is a number assigned to you by the state government at the time of business registration and incorporation. While charities registration is only for nonprofit entities, every type of business operating in New Jersey has been assigned a number by the Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. It is 10 digits long, usually beginning with a 0. You use this number annually when filing your annual report with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. Organizations must be currently registered as a nonprofit corporation, NP or NF, with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and compliant with all renewal requirements in order to be qualified. If you do not know your organization's DOORS entity ID number, you can search for it on the DOORS website. We provided a link to this database in the online application form. Or to find your entity ID number, you can check your DOORS annual report filing document or your business registration certificate. If you have difficulty getting the answers you need from government or regulatory agencies at the local, state, and federal levels, including the good standing documentation that we will address later in this workshop, the state of New Jersey also has a resource to help with that. The New Jersey Business Action Center is a state agency intended to help businesses thrive, grow, and succeed across New Jersey. And yes, nonprofits are businesses too. The team at BAC can help connect you to resources. BAC has a free business helpline for this purpose at 1-800-JERSEY-7. Also check out BAC's Nonprofit Information Center, which has a number of helpful resources for nonprofits. In addition to entering your organization's information, there are 2 fields in the online application where you must enter short written statements. The first is your organization's board-adopted mission statement. We do not need the board minutes or the record of the board vote to prove that the mission statement has been adopted by your board. The second is a short statement explaining how your organization's mission and activities demonstrate a primary purpose of arts, history, and humanities. We will explore this second statement a little further. Factors that may contribute to your organization's eligibility under the primary purpose requirement include the majority of the organization's programming consists of arts, history, humanities programming and services. The majority of the organization's audience is driven by arts, history, humanities programming. The majority of the organization's earned income comes from arts, history, humanities-based programs and services. The majority of the organization's expense budget supports arts, history, humanities-based programs and services. This statement must not exceed 1,500 characters, including spaces. Since there is no save function in the application form, we recommend that you write this statement in Word or another word processor, and then copy and paste it into the application form when you are ready to submit. As you can see, as previously mentioned, offering some arts, history, and humanities programming, if it is not the primary thrust or reason your organization exists, would not typically constitute qualification eligibility. Again, please refer to the definitions of arts, history, and humanities that were included earlier in this workshop when considering your organization's eligibility. In addition to entering your organization's information, you must also upload the required attachments. Your application for qualification is not complete unless you include all of the required attachments. If you try to submit the online application without uploading the required files, you will receive an error message. First, we require a copy of the organization's IRS tax determination letter as proof of your organization's tax-exempt 501c status from the Internal Revenue Service. Please make sure you submit your letter of determination, which contains language that mentions your 501c status, like, we are pleased to inform you that upon review of your application for tax-exempt status, we have determined that you are exempt from federal income tax under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Your organization may also have a letter from the IRS that simply confirms your EIN number, but does not discuss your tax-exempt status. That letter will not fulfill this requirement, so please make sure you send us the correct IRS letter. Next, we require proof of your organization's active good standing with the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. We just discussed the New Jersey Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services in the context of your entity ID number. Every year as a business entity, you are required to file an annual report with the Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services. This is different from the paperwork you file with charities registration. It's a brief online form in which you share information about your board members, as well as your workers' compensation insurance. This is the website where you complete that online filing. Once you complete the online form, you are emailed a link to a certificate of annual report filing. You must click the link in the email and download the certificate within 30 days. Here, we are asking for you to send us your most recent certificate of annual report filing. It looks like this. This is an anonymized version of that certificate. Next, we require summaries of your organization's activities for the past 2 years describing major programs and services. These can be internal documents or a set of bullet points. It's just meant to give us a comprehensive sense of what your organization does as far as programming, to flesh out the mission statement that you submit. You can send us published annual reports that your organization sends to donors, grant reports sent to annual grant funders, reports delivered to the Board of Trustees, or bullet-pointed lists of your programs and services. We don't necessarily need you to put something customized together for us as long as you submit something that outlines all of your activities for the past 2 years. If you have any activities that are not arts, history, or humanities related, those activities must also be included in this summary. There are 2 upload fields in the qualification application form for this requirement, one for each year. Please be sure to prepare to upload 2 different documents, each covering a full year of activities. We also will not accept a generalized list of program offerings. This information should be specific to what has actually been offered over the last 2 years. This next requirement should be public-facing external materials. To illustrate your summary of your program, we'd like some documentation of what you offer. This could be event calendars, brochures, email blasts, outreach materials, press releases. It's just important that this is material that is intended for public distribution. You may upload up to 5 pieces of documentation using the single upload field. When you click Select Files, you will be able to select multiple files to upload. Alternatively, you may first upload one file, then click Select Files again and add another file. Next, you will need to include a full list of the current members of your board. Please indicate which members are officers and which offices they hold. The New Jersey Nonprofit Corporation Act requires your board to have at least 3 members who are 18 years of age or older. The Act also requires your board to have the following officer positions represented: President, Secretary, and Treasurer. Trust staff will review your board list to ensure it meets these state-level governance requirements. Next, you must include the minutes of the board meeting at which the board approved your most recent annual budget. The minutes should clearly show that the budget was approved at the meeting. Next, there is a financial documentation requirement. We ask that you please review this requirement very carefully, as it is different from organization to organization. The financial documentation requirement is dependent on your annual budget size, as long as you do not have endowment holdings over $100,000. Your budget is defined as your annual total gross income or contributions, not expenses. These are the 3 budget categories. Each one has a different documentation requirement. For organizations with annual total gross contributions of $1 million or more, you must submit certified independent audits for your organization's past 2 completed fiscal years. Regardless of your budget size, if you have an endowment over $100,000, then you also need to submit certified independent audits. For organizations with annual total gross contributions between $25,000 and $1 million per year, you must submit your Forms 990 and your board-approved budgets for the last 2 completed fiscal years. You may instead submit 2 certified independent audits or independent financial reviews if you have those. If you are uploading 990s, please be sure to remove Schedule B, the schedule that lists the names and addresses of your donors, so that you are only providing us with the public 990 document. Please note that the Cultural Trust requires that budgets must be complete planning documents for the entire organization for an entire fiscal year, including both income and expenses. For organizations with annual total gross contributions under $25,000, you must submit a copy of your board-approved annual budgets for the last 2 completed fiscal years. Once again, please note that the Cultural Trust requires that budgets be complete planning documents for the entire organization for an entire fiscal year, including both income and expenses. For all of these budget categories, it is essential that you submit 2 years of documentation. That means 2 audits or 2 990s and 2 budgets. Organizations that only submit 1 year of documentation will have incomplete applications. Please make special note that organizations in this middle budget category need to submit 990s and budgets. The budget requirement is often overlooked. Organizations that only submit 990s without budgets will have incomplete applications. There are 2 upload fields in the qualification application form for the financial documentation requirement, one for each year. For each upload field, you may upload up to 2 pieces of documentation using the single upload field. When you click Select Files, you will be able to select multiple files to upload. Alternatively, you may first upload one file, then click Select Files again and add another file. The Cultural Trust requires that budgets be complete planning documents for the entire organization for an entire fiscal year. What exactly do we mean by this? If you fall into a category where you will be required to provide board-approved budgets as part of your financial documentation, these are the characteristics of compliant budgets for your application. Budgeted numbers should cover the entire fiscal year. The budget should not be presented on a per program or per performance basis, but should be formulated to cover the entire fiscal year as per best practices. Line items in the budget can be arranged according to specific programs or performances, but the budget document itself should be inclusive of all the expenses and income anticipated for the entire year, including all programs and management and operational expenses. A budget for just a single program will not be accepted. The budget should include projections for both income and expenses. If the budget only includes projected expenses but not projected sources of income or revenue, then it is not a complete budget document. Finally, the budget should be a projection, a plan put together before the fiscal year starts, not a presentation of your actual income and expenses for that fiscal year. These projections are a guide for the year and can be adjusted while the fiscal year is underway based on changing circumstances. The Cultural Trust Board seeks evidence that your organization is engaging in financial planning. If your organization has not been in the practice of putting together a full year complete budget, the Cultural Trust website has some resources to help you get started on a budget process that involves the oversight of your board. Finally, there is the Qualification Application Certification form, which is part of the application certification process. Once you have entered all of the required information and uploaded all of the necessary attachments, you will certify and submit your application. 2 individuals must certify the application: the authorizing official, usually a staff member, and the authorizing board member. The authorizing official will certify the application within the online form. They will need to enter their name and title, then check the box certifying that the application and uploads are true and accurate. They will then sign in the authorizing official signature box, either by drawing their signature in the large box or typing their name in the small box below it. Finally, they will enter the date. The authorizing board member will certify the application using a separate PDF or paper form. After reviewing the application contents you have assembled, the authorizing board member should complete and sign the Qualification Application Certification Form PDF, which you see on the screen. This separate PDF form is included in the Qualification Guidelines PDF. It is also linked in the online qualification application. Please remember that the board member signing this PDF document must be a different individual from the authorizing official digitally signing the online application form. Once your board member completes this qualification application certification form, you will save it as a PDF file and you will upload it using the upload field at the very bottom of the application form. It is essential that you have this signed form from your board member in hand before you start completing the online application. Otherwise, you will get stuck at the very end and will not be able to submit. After you have completed the form and uploaded all of the required files, you will submit the application by clicking the Submit button at the bottom of the application. When you hit the Submit button, you will see this message indicating you have successfully submitted your application. An automated email will also be sent to the email listed in the application as the primary contact email. If you do not see the submission confirmation message when you click Submit, please scroll up and ensure that you have completed all required fields and attached all required uploads. Qualification is a rolling process. Organizations can apply at any time and their applications will be considered at the next Cultural Trust Board meeting. The Cultural Trust Board meets 4 times per year. Typically, if you want to be considered at a particular board meeting, you must submit your application for qualification 1 month prior. For example, if you want the board to consider your application at its March meeting, you must submit your application by February. Cultural Trust grant programs do require applicants to become qualified before the grant deadline. We encourage organizations to stay up to date on their qualification so that they do not have to scramble to become qualified before a grant opportunity. You will be notified by snail mail and email when your qualification status expires and will be encouraged to reapply at that time. Later in 2025, the Declaration of Intent to Apply will open for the Cultural Trust Fiscal Year 26 grant program, which will be institutional and financial stabilization grants for history and humanities organizations. If you are considering applying for an IFS History or Humanities grant, your organization must be qualified in order to be eligible for consideration. If your organization's qualification status is expired or will expire this year, your qualification application must be submitted no later than 3 p.m. on June 11th, 2025, in order to be considered and received and processed in time for the Cultural Trust Board's July meeting. Due to the high volume of submissions, only applications that are complete and meet core eligibility criteria are presented to the Cultural Trust Board for consideration. If your application is incomplete or if incorrect materials were submitted, Cultural Trust staff will reach out to the contact person identified in the application to ask them to complete or correct the application. An incomplete application must be completed within 6 months of the date of the Cultural Trust first received it. After 6 months, the incomplete application will be deemed ineligible for consideration, and the organization must submit a new application. That concludes our workshop. Cultural Trust staff are always available to answer your questions about the qualification process or the Cultural Trust grant program. Our contact information is here. Thank you.